Today we have MOF, two MOF representatives on our panel. First we have Rohini Singh, and we have Frederick Chu. Representing the Debate Association of Singapore, we have an EXCO member today, Mr. Samuel Miat-san. The teams are going to be simulating an actual parliamentary debate where different teams take on different roles, and they'll be arguing from the roles that you see on the screen here. Each speaker has 5 minutes to make their case and attack the opposing team. And the chief reason I'm here is this shiny thing here called the bell. At 30 seconds into your speeches, I'll ring this bell once, and then points of information can be offered from the opposing side. So let's say the proposition speaking, only the opposition can offer points of information, and the same the other way around. 4 minutes, 30 seconds into your speech, I'll ring it again, and that'll signal that you should start wrapping up. At 5 minutes, I'll ring it twice, and that's a signal that you really need to wrap up. Right? 5 minutes, 30 seconds in, I'll ring it incessantly, and it'll be really annoying, so you just stop. To start us out, I call Anne of ACJC to open the case for Proposition Team 1.
Singapore has constantly committed itself to being a garden city. And this is because our government recognizes the need to preserve our environment. In 2002, the Ministry of Environment came up with a Sustainable Development Plan for Singapore, the Green Plan 2012. However, with the imminent financial crisis, most people think that the environment should take a backseat. We believe that this is untrue and that we should, in fact, prioritize the environment in this time. We see that efficiency, which is prized in a time of financial crisis, is also something that environmentalism stands for. And this is where they coincide. Environmentally friendly practices mean you maximize what you have and you produce more with less. Canon, a company top in cameras as well as the environment, shares that its secret to success is that it streamlines work processes and maximizes its natural resources. There's a definite synergy between the environment and the economy, and that Singapore is not exploiting it fully. We see the need to step up our game and to give people incentive. Thus, to help our colleagues in the Ministry of Environment, I, as the Minister of Finance, will propose a scheme to impose taxes to encourage environmentally friendly practices. We think that this policy will work, because Singaporeans have consistently shown us that they respond very well if you hit their pockets. And we believe this happens for two reasons. The first reason is that we have a very large middle class, which has some money, but not enough to cushion them from the pinch that taxes impose. The second reason we believe this happens is because half our industry is linked to the government and therefore is more receptive to government policies than the private sector. Perhaps the most prominent example of taxes working in Singapore is something that you all encountered on your way here, the electronic road pricing. We put it in to prevent congestion, and it works. It reduces the number of cars on the road by 25,000 during peak hour and reduces traffic congestion by 13% in the restricted zone. We're all here at time, so I guess it works. Yes, madam.
You don't realize that taxes are actually indirect because they may not necessarily change behavior. Companies may still choose to keep and bear the burden.
The taxes, what's the company going to do? Are they going to absorb all the taxes? It's really quite impossible for them to do so. So it acts as a deterrent from people from buying energy inefficient goods. But let's not jump the gun. Let's talk about my case division today. Today, I, as the Minister, will be speaking to you on how our policy will work on two fields. Firstly, that of climate change, and secondly, that of waste disposal. My deputy today will be speaking to you on the strategic importance of conserving clean water. Now, onto our first idea on that of climate change. I have two prongs, no thank you ma'am, under this. The first prong is that we would tax heavy industry for emitting more carbon than the preset acceptable PSI reading. The second thing that we will do is that we will tax companies, no thank you ma'am, for their utilities usage. Because we see that electricity is generated by burning fossil fuels which emit carbon, and we want to give companies incentive to use more energy-efficient fuels to power their building and to have air condition. So we say that we believe because of all this that people will respond to our policies as logic that I've already explained to you in my setup. Thank you, ma'am. And we believe there are 3 benefits that will happen because of this. The first one is that we'll have less carbon emissions, which means we contribute less to climate change and the apocalyptic scenario that it presents to us today. The second thing that will happen is that we'll have cleaner air, which is healthier air, and it means that people are less likely to have respiratory diseases like asthma. The third thing that we think will happen is that it will encourage people to be less wasteful with energy, and that we say is an important step towards taking care of our environment. The second thing that I'm going to talk to you all about today is this idea of waste disposal. So our aim is to reduce waste in the environment that people give out. And the first thing that we will do is tax non-biodegradable materials that people use. And the second thing we'll do is to have a pay-as-you-throw policy. We believe that this will make people responsible for the waste that they dispose of, and firstly, encourage recycling, easing depletion of natural resources, and secondly, we also believe that this will ease our incinerators and landfills, allowing us to make better use of them. Therefore, today, I have shown you our policy that will work to help us keep our environment clean.
I now call on Sarah of VJC to begin the attack from the opposition.
Winston Churchill once said, "There is no such thing as a good tax." Now, members of this House, that is certainly true in this case. Because although the EDB and large businesses in Singapore are fully for environmental protection, we believe that tax is not the way to go. Instead, we support the policy of direct environmental legislation, which has been implemented in Singapore since 1999. Now, it is this policy that best balances the policy objectives of building a sustainable environment with economic growth. It is also this policy that is implemented through the Environmental Protection Management Act, which is under the jurisdiction of the Director General of Environmental Protection, Mr. Joseph Hui. No, thank you, madam. It provides for the direct control of pollution at the source by ensuring that measures such as making pollution control equipment compulsory, such as toxic gas absorbing filters and so on, are installed and put in place. Secondly, under Section 6 of the Act, all industrial companies need to comply with the Act's terms in order to get a license to operate. Now, at the same time, flexibility is also present because the exact terms of the Act are left to the discretion of the Director General. So, members of this House, this policy is more flexible and more direct than a tax policy. No, thank you, sir. And the Ministry of Finance needs to prove to us how the Act is not sufficient. And they have to prove how their policy is better than the Act on these 2 fronts. If they can't, then members of this House, the motion before us collapses. As the opposition, I'll be explaining how the Act surpasses tax on the grounds of directness, while my second speaker will illustrate the point of flexibility. But first of all, let's take a look at the policy put forth by the Ministry of Finance. Now, they left a lot of questions unanswered, such as, how did they decide at the optimum tax level? How did they come about it? How is this policy going to be enforced? Are all industries, no thank you madam, are all industries going to be affected, such as the manufacturing industry, which contributes 23% to our GDP, but will suffer if taxed? So clearly, we cannot be so foolhardy as to support this kind of unconsidered policy, because it might have severe ramifications on our country. I challenge the next speaker to come up and clarify these points of their policy. No, thank you, sir. Now, the arguments that the proposition has brought forth are also problematic. And why so? Because number one, tax is ineffective. It doesn't solve the problems it sets out to solve. Because they hope that miraculously, by implementing tax, hold on a minute, ma'am, by implementing tax, behavior will suddenly change and lead to environmental protection. But this is not true. Yes, ma'am.
Madam, the ERP has worked to prevent congestion. That means taxes work.
Yes, madam, but that is different because that is a tax on the amount of cars on the road. And just because the amount of cars on the road have reduced does not mean that tax is effective, because they may only have reduced it by a small percent, whereas legislation puts in place a framework that makes all companies accountable for environmental protection. Let me give you the example, no thank you sir, of the UK, where an environmental tax was implemented in 2001. 52%, ladies and gentlemen, of their companies have not implemented any kind of environmentally friendly practices. Clearly, tax is ineffective. Secondly, tax brings about negative economic consequences. And why? Because the EDB banks on our friendly and low tax regime as the main factor to attract investors. And the KPMG did a study across 12 economies which shows that there is a direct link between tax and foreign investment. If we tax the companies now, the cost of business is going to go up.
Madam.
And your investment, no thank you madam, is going to go down. The consequences here are going to be magnified in Singapore because Singapore depends on foreign investment for growth. No thank you sir. So this is going to have dire consequences on our economy, on our employment, on our growth and our prosperity as a country. Now, in comparison, environmental legislation stands in a much better place, in a more effective position to help the environment directly. Now, how so? It makes sure that it's compulsory for all companies to comply with the terms of the Act before they get a license to operate. These terms include those mentioned under Sections 10 to 12 of the Act, such as the prohibition of the emission of nitrogen dioxide beyond the standard set. Now, when implemented, this directly impacts the environment because through the Yearbook of Statistics 2008, it showed that the nitrogen dioxide levels fell by 50% after the laws were implemented. Not only that, but legislation has been in place for over 10 years, and throughout these 10 years, our economic performance has been great. So clearly, legislation does not undermine the attractiveness of our country to investors as tax does. Now, at the end of the day, let us all stay the course on direct environmental legislation. Because if we move away from taxes, we move towards a greater environment. Thank you.